Hey heroes, welcome to On Scene First. I'm your host, Tracy Eldridge. With over 25 years in public safety, I am wicked excited and honored to bring you entertaining, educational, and empowering conversations with public safety difference makers who are harnessing the power of out-of-the-box thinking when it comes to using the latest and greatest must-have technology tools, a people-first leadership approach, and mental health resources to save lives on both sides of the call. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you to our premier sponsor, NGA 911. With their reliable, cloud-based, end-to-end NG 911 solutions, I am super confident they can fulfill your needs when it comes to next-gen core services, call handling, data analytics, and much more. Oh, and did I mention it is affordable and customizable? Make sure you visit our friends at www.nga911.com and tell them Tracy sent you. Now, on with the show. All right. I am wicked excited for today's guest. One of my newer friends met online, as I do with many folks, and then got to spend some time recently in person at an amazing event that he and some other amazing folks put on. But I would like to welcome my friend Keith Hanks. How are you, Keith?
I'm good, Tracy. How you doing?
Good, good. I'm so happy to have you here. I know we've been chatting about getting you on the podcast, but schedules are just super, super crazy. We got to spend some time together last Friday, so we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But for my guests who don't know you, I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are today, and then we're going to go backwards. So who's Keith Hanks today? What are you doing?
Who is Keith Hanks today? I don't even know if Keith Hanks knows who Keith Hanks is today.
Perfect. Okay.
No, seriously. So without getting too much into my past, I was a firefighter and EMT for 21 years. These days, I consider myself a self-proclaimed advocate for mental health. I've been advocating for it. Started on social media. I kind of took off in the, writing articles and doing different things like that, and book work and public speaking. Before you knew it, I was going around telling everybody about my feelings and how it's okay to be okay as long as you don't stay there, and it's okay to get help and the resources. And before you know it, I connected with other resources. And one of the things I do nowadays is I am the director of promotions for a first responder coaching, and just another resource of trying to get out to the first responder community and their families. So in a nutshell, that's who I am, or what I do, at least today.
Yeah, so that's our paths kind of crossed on social media. I never know the moment, and I wish I could remember those things. I just can't. But there's always this moment when my path crosses with someone who has a similar mission, and then before you know it, you're already knee deep in, just really supporting each other and making sure that we're getting the message out there. And so I became friends with Jennifer Anderson, the founder of First Responder Coaching. I did have an interview with her. So if you want to hear more specifically about First Responder Coaching, go back and check out that episode. I'm not good at remembering the episode numbers, but go back and find it and listen to all the other ones too. And then I saw your paths crossing, and then, getting into doing more and more work together, and then saw you in your new role, which I just thought was amazing. But you said you were a firefighter, and I'm assuming there became a time in your career where things weren't as great as they used to be. Do you know kind of when that started to happen or to transition, or did you not see it when it was happening?
I get asked that a lot, and I go at that answer in two different ways. So I knew that things are different in me. I knew the job and in life had affected me probably by 2010.
Okay.
which by that point I had 14 years in the job. However, I knew the job was different probably within the first 4 months of being on. I knew it wasn't just being a hero and, oh, you're just going to see, bad things, and it is what it is. It was, being 18 years old and be on the fire department and stuff. Within 4 months, I realized that it wasn't just the calls. There was more to this job than that. So it's kind of a two-stage answer for me, I think. But
Okay.
I would say 2010 is really where things started hitting the fan.
So when you talk about that 4 month mark, what happened at that 4 month mark? I know, but they don't know.
So, and I talk about this pretty much all the time wherever I go because I feel it's important for two reasons. In March of '97, I was a senior in high school. I was a call member of the department I was on. I woke up on a Sunday morning to the tones going off for a building fire with people trapped. We were a smaller department at the time. I was close. I lived close to the station, got there first. And at the same time, our fire chief signed en route to the call. En route, he signed off saying, confirming there were people trapped and he was going in. And that was the last we heard of him during our response up to the house, which when you're young and don't know how some of these things work, and this is your first fire with people trapped, your mind goes sideways. So I'm, of course, freaking out. I'm sitting in the doghouse of the fire truck or the back of the fire truck, depending what your terminology is. And
Yeah.
with someone who's as new as me, not as young as me, but as new as me. And we're both crapping our pants. And I got off. I was assigned to the water supply seat, which meant I had to get off and pull the line off the back of the truck. So they pulled forward up the 100-foot driveway, and all I saw was a ball of flames. So I was under the impression my fire chief was dead, and anyone who was getting up to the house. And this is sort of for me, it was a pivotal moment because I hadn't seen anything like this in my life. I pull up to the side of the house, and what I thought was a pile of blankets walks by me. And as it got next to me, I realized it wasn't because the smell hit me, and it was come to find out it was the elderly woman who was trapped inside, and she was just completely burnt. As I'm seeing this, I look off to my right to the garage, and there's another elderly person, a gentleman, who's bleeding from the wrists, with a cop standing next to him. And then I turn my attention back to the house, and the fire chief dives out the window being chased by flames. And this is all like in, I don't even know, like 35 seconds.
I was going to say like milliseconds, right? But it's probably going in slow motion.
It is. And I can still play out all that. And we're talking almost 26 years ago or 25 years ago. And, the call itself was really bad. It ended up being a murder-suicide attempt. The woman was medically very sick, and the husband didn't want to live without her. She wanted to die. He couldn't, face the flames to go back in, so he tried killing himself. The call itself is bad.
Yeah.
For me, the takeaway with this and what has led me try to, invoke so many changes in the first responder world is what happened after with the critical incident stress meeting. And it's become sort of a joke, honestly, what takes place. And the key line in this has sort of become a major player in some of the other things I do. We have the SISM on a Wednesday night. I believe it was a Wednesday night. We go in, it's all the, the dispatcher, the EMTs that were there, the cops, myself, the first crew that was there, the chief, all men. And we're all sitting in this room, and the guy running it looks at us all. And I was like, oh, you guys were at a call. Someone died. You want to talk about it? And there was crickets, and no one said anything.
Yeah.
And, within 2 seconds, he's like, okay, guys, coffee and donuts in the back. And that's literally what he said. And for me, having the past that I did and going into this call and having this, and I say this all the time, this slice of humble pie served to me or force fed to me. And then going into this with my peers and the people I looked up to, people I knew before I got in the department, all being like, no, we don't talk about that. And, sitting there with our arms crossed, men. And
you forgot pounding your chest.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going. It was impressionable. It was, this is who you have to be. We don't talk about this. And I wasn't even out of high school.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I mean, at that point, I had been to more fires than I had been on dates. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. That's crazy when you think about that, right?
It's nuts. And as I mean, especially as a man, or a young man, our brains are so pliable at that point. You know what I mean? And to sit there in a room and be basically told not to talk about stuff. That's what I did. The rest of my career, that's how it was. And I was one of those guys who wasn't in the forefront of doing so, but I was one of those guys who was like, yeah, we don't talk about that. I didn't push that on people in that sort of sense because there was still part of me that knew we should be.
Yeah.
But, that was a pivotal moment in my young life.
I can see where that would be, because one of the things that I've talked about before on different episodes, and I share in a lot of my sessions, which by the way, I love that you added to the sentence, it's okay to not be okay. You just can't stay there.
That's right.
That's super important. And to see that like kind of moving forward is really important. That is what I want to talk about for a minute. Is for so long we were taught, well, let me go back. In the beginning of my career, we weren't taught. So in 1996, when I was a baby dispatcher, we didn't have mental health and wellness training. We didn't
Right.
we didn't have folks telling us like, hey, these are the things you should be on the lookout for. A few years in, yep, we started talking about it, but we didn't finish that sentence either. We
Mm-hmm.
basically told folks like, oh yeah, these are the signs of critical incident stress. Not sleeping, irritability, drinking, alcohol, like drugs, whatever. They listed all these things, but nobody ever finished a sentence to say, if you're experiencing this, we need you to go get a checkup from the neck up. So
Yeah.
when you have impressionable folks like you and I, and we're young getting into this profession, you're expecting it. So all of a sudden you start feeling these things. And then you're like, oh, they told me about this.
Mm.
And that's it.
Yeah. That's where it ends. Or at least that's
So
where it ended.
so I want you to share a little bit of your story, because you are totally the epitome for me of, you don't know what somebody's going through behind the scenes. And so you shared a story during your presentation last week that I had no idea, that I think was a pivotal moment in changes for you. So tell me about the first part of your life where things started to change. You had some dramatic things happen, but where did those significant changes start?
So I think, once I was doing both, firefighting, shift work at the firehouse and private EMS, getting married at a young age, all being before, age 23, it was really in those moments that I started realizing there was more, not just to the job, but to life. But I didn't know how to, because of everything I had been through and the family I grew up in, the way I was raised, the people who were on the job that surrounded me, I had no idea like how to process these things. So a lot of my stuff, because come to find out, I had complex PTSD the whole time. A lot of these things came out as anger, and it wasn't until after I got married to my first wife that I had someone in my life that was like, hey, something's not right. This isn't how you act. This isn't how normal young men act. And so with my first wife, Heather, we had started in 2002, late 2002, trying to find me help. And back then, culturally competent help, key phrase, didn't exist.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many therapy sessions I went to where they never even brought up the job. It wasn't even considered. But we were trying to get me help. Things weren't going great with it because I was resistive. I was lying. I wasn't telling, everything that happened to me. I got put on some meds, didn't agree with my body or my psychology. Kind of came unhinged, ended up getting in domestic with Heather, which was sort of like a red light, right? Like that was like a warning sign that, because I had never heard a fly my entire life. I was a kid who got bullied in school and didn't fight back. I was a kid who would get insulted and wouldn't insult back. I was very submissive to a certain degree because of who I was. And now I'm hurting my wife.
The aggressor.
I'm now the abuser and the aggressor. And this was a big moment. So, we separated. And, when she honestly finally was like, all right, I've had enough. This was dumb. I can see that this isn't who you are. She came, I was staying with my parents. She came to me on a Friday night. It was like, let's make this better. And I remember her looking at me. I can still see her face. We're gonna get you help. And I had hope, what I mean? So that night we had made plans. It was April 11th, 2003 at this point. And we made plans with a friend to go out to dinner. Hey, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate life. Let's celebrate, being a family, being friends. Let's just celebrate getting better. And we ended up not making it to our destination that night. We got in a really bad car accident, and Heather was killed. And the one thing I didn't realize necessarily at the time, even though it was happening, was as a first responder, when you're involved in a situation, especially in my case, where you're the driver of a motor vehicle that gets in a car accident and someone dies, everything that you've done up to that point is bullshit. It doesn't matter. Why did I bother? I did all these things. I've saved all these people, and now I couldn't even save my wife, and they couldn't
Right.
even save my wife, and all that. I didn't realize all that was going on. I didn't.
Right.
But this incident and several that followed very immediately thereafter really molded who I became for probably the next 15 years, both in my career and my personal life. And because of, how Heather died, the fact that we had two very young children at the time, that I then had to become a sole parent. And as a man, a father, and a spouse, I'm now faced with an immense amount more guilt over their mother not being there. And I just shut off my emotions. I literally made a conscious decision to shut them off. And I told myself I was never going to feel them again. And I was never going to get hurt. And I did that. And it honestly probably made things worse. And I think the job and any other personal matters that happened thereafter were magnified tenfold more than they had to be if I had been dealing with my emotions, being supported in a way to process the things that I was going through. But we didn't know. And 2003, 2004, it was we just didn't talk about these things. We didn't talk about the effects of the job or the things we go through as responders in our personal life, where it's
Right.
like, whoa, he's been going to car accidents for 6 years, and he just gotten one. How do we, no one really, there was no what's the next step. And honestly, that was sort of that point early on, before I was even 25, before I was
Wow.
that all this shit happened, and it sort of dictated the path for me professionally and personally.
Wow. So such a powerful story. It's one of those things that when you talk about losing the time that you had, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, this is really what I want, and let's make this better, and the opportunity wasn't given to you. So I can see where most folks would see where you would be angry and not wanting to feel the things that you were feeling. So
Right.
tell me about what the next phase looks like. So you're a young dad with two young children trying to do this thing on your own. I can see the trajectory of where it's going, but I want to talk more on a more positive note. And I'm assuming there was a backslide. I'm assuming there was a spiral downward. Is
Mm-hmm.
that safe
Oh
to
yeah,
assume?
safe to
So
assume.
so what did that look like in general? So if somebody's listening, and I do think it's important to talk about it, as to what it looked like, as much as you're willing to share, because there's so many folks out there that this is what it looks like for them, but they're not seeing that it's a problem. So tell me a little bit about what it looked like. What did the downward spiral look like? And then I want to talk about where we are, how we got to where we are today, and the positive things that are in your world.
Right. Yeah, and this part's really important because a lot of people don't know what to look for, or maybe see it and don't know what they're looking at. So for me, one of the things that I end up using as coping skills were bad coping skills, and most of that was drinking, drugging, and risky behavior in relationships. And
Yep.
it was none of it helped.
No.
I momentarily, sure,
we
it numbed
know
it,
we know that we know that it doesn't help.
but it was accepted as well, especially as a man. And I do want to, I want to harp on that. People knew I was drinking. People even, they may not have knew about the drugging as much, but they knew I was drinking. They knew I was getting around. And that was accepted. And it was accepted mainly because I was a guy. It was like, oh yeah, thanks, yeah, getting around. Yeah, oh yeah, another beer, another bottle, whatever. And it was accepted. And I look back on these things and it's like, why didn't anyone intervene? But that's like some of the obvious stuff. There was anger. There was emotionalness. There was sort of like seclusion and removing myself from activities that I normally would be very much a part of. So like there was a lot of obvious stuff. A lot of things people weren't seeing was the things I was keeping from, and that was like the suicide attempts. That was the sort of not being the father I could have been because I didn't really know how to be because I had no emotions, and sort of shutting off, and they call it what, compassion fatigue these days,
Mhm.
but cutting off my emotions to the job, where I didn't care who was hurt in front of me. I didn't care who died. I had a hard time feeling sorry for people who were about to lose their 90-year-old grandparents. Like, they're old. I found myself no longer having emotions towards things or caring.
Yeah.
And that was sort of how that played out, and it lasted a very long time. The drinking and drugging didn't. I got over that pretty quickly, thank God.
Yeah.
but the risky behavior lasted for years, and it's a lot of what people don't see is this behavior becomes self-perpetuating, where you're so alone. You may be surrounded by the most people in the room, but you are so alone inside, and you're
Yep.
doing these things to grab attention, and you're trying to scream at people that I am hurting so bad, please help me. But I can't say that because we don't say that. But here's this behavior, please help me, and no one's helping.
Right.
And in the meantime, you're creating this atmosphere and this hostility, even where people don't want anything to do with you. They're afraid to help you. They're afraid to talk to you. And that's what my life sort of became for a very long time, because of this behavior and because of this lack of support and help during this time.
Well, and you hurt the people around you too.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I've said before and I talk about is, there was a couple of moments where I realized that my behavior and my reactions were possibly causing trauma for my family and people around me. And so I think once you can see it and perceive it, like, to me, unless you see it or feel it, people could tell me all the time, right? But unless you get to the realization yourself, it's almost like that rock bottom, right? Until you get to the place where it's the darkest of the dark and you can't see it or feel it yourself,
Right.
it's going to be very challenging for you to make a conscious effort to change. So speaking of changing,
Yep.
where was the moments? I mean, was it a distinct moment where you're like, all right, I need to cut this out? Or was it a progression? Tell me where the change started to take place in a positive direction.
Right. So honestly, that all this behavior and negativity and I guess inward turn self-destruction lasted for a very long time. And it wasn't until I had met my second wife, Adele, in 2011 that I started to get more of an upswing and more support in my life. And at this point, I had lost custody of my two older kids. I had been forced out of the family house that we had all bought together. Things have really kind of gotten negative again. But finally, I had someone who was very supportive. And when I finally realized that, or we honestly realized that something needed to change, it was in 2014, which was a year we got married. And there was, a bunch of key events that took place that were sort of negative initially, but they led to a realization that there's more out there. There's more to life. There is hope. Things can change. And so come 2015, I started getting now culturally competent help. I went to, a couple different programs. I started On-Site Academy here in Mass. I ended up finally going through the McLean's Leader Program down in Belmont. And I finally got diagnosed with PTSD and then eventually complex PTSD, along with DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called split personality or multiple personality, which is always fun. So now I had the reasons, right? I don't ever. I'm one of those people who are like, we have reasons, we don't have excuses. When you go through things, there's no excuse to be an asshole. There's no excuse to hurt other people. And as much as I did, I had reasons why I did, but they weren't excuses.
I
And
love that. I've never heard that before.
it's the truth. And I own my shit. I have to this day. And it was in this moment where I finally had, okay, this is why this is happening. It's not just because I'm an angry demonic prick. It's because all this stuff has happened to me and since for an early age and undiagnosed and unsupported and unresolved. Now I can start working on this and I can choose to work on it and get better, or I can choose to sit here and let it fester and let it eat me alive and eventually kill me. And so I did. And I put my, my heart and my soul into this. I started journaling. This journaling became what's eventually going to be my book if I ever get off my ass and finish editing it. It became advocating. And it became being honest. And I can lie like nobody's business. And I know that may sound awful, but for years I fooled doctors, nurses, therapists, myself, my family.
Yeah.
And now I wasn't. Now I was being honest when I went into my therapy sessions. Now I was being honest with myself. Wow, I really don't feel safe right now. Or, oh, wow, this really bothered me. Maybe I should talk about it. Maybe I should face these feelings and whatnot. And that's sort of where it started. 2015 was where I was like, hey, there's help. This feels good to be getting help. I no longer care whether it's accepted that I get help, because this is going to kill me if I don't.
Right.
And, but, with that, of course, becomes that shift in the culture where it's like, whoa, he's getting help. And, eventually, And it's funny because what ended up becoming the final straw for me with my career in 2017 wasn't a bad call. I eventually got to the point where I was like, if I want to continue to heal, if I want to continue to grow as a man, as a person, I need to walk away from the job. And it wasn't even a bad call. It wasn't a dead kid. It wasn't a fire. It was a complaint filed against because I yelled at a nurse. And the way it went down on administrator level just was enough. I was like, you know something, this is my sign.
Yeah.
And it's weird now because 5 years later now I've talked to dozens and dozens of other respondents and like, yeah, it wasn't the bad call. It was the lack of support and the administrative betrayal. And that was what got me to leave the job. But it was a good thing. It was a good thing. And I didn't see it then. I was so bitter with the job, but it led me down a path where I've grown to be stronger than I ever have been in my life. And I'm now 44. It's not, like I always thought I was at my prime in my 20s, right? But at 44, mentally and physically, I'm stronger than I ever have been. And a lot of that has contributed to finally admitting that I need to leave the job and to heal from these things. So that's really the probably the positive swing up in the end, the best thing I did.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks, so I left my 911 center after 20 years and you are 100% right. It was not the calls. I mean, did they come to the surface after the Band-Aid got ripped off? Yes, absolutely 100%. But the Band-Aid got ripped off. So wherever it is for you that the Band-Aid gets ripped off, for me, it was my old town manager. He ripped the Band-Aid off and just continued to pour salt in that open wound that hadn't fully healed yet. And so it just starts building and building and building. And my goal in public safety, honestly, is to get you to stay if you get the help that allows you to stay, or to get you to leave because maybe your story is your next chapter is starting. So for me leaving, it was the hardest decision I ever made because that's all I knew. And I thought that's where I was supposed to be. And when in reality, I knew, nope, I was supposed to take a pit stop at Rapid SOS and I'm supposed to be here doing exactly what I'm doing. And I truly feel the same for you because there can come anger with that decision to leave too, right? I'm sure there was some anger there. But what would you say the most significant type of treatment was for you? I know you said you went to Onsite and the leader program at McLean. Both I've heard are amazing programs. I attempted to go to Onsite, but my trauma was a little bit different and it wasn't going to be the right fit at the moment.
Right.
But I've heard some amazing things about both of those places. So you went to treatment, but what was the type of treatment? Because my treatment that saved my life was EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I've done probably over 100 sessions. It is scary as hell sometimes. Sometimes I know what I get to process, but sometimes it's wicked scary. But it's the right treatment for me. What would you say that the most profound, or if it's a couple of things, what do you think was it talk therapy? What was it?
So full disclaimer, Onsite also helped me realize that I was also way too big for their britches. I was much too much for them to handle, which was a good thing. But while there, I did try EMDR, and when it is done correctly, EMDR is amazing. I will second that. It is an amazing. Yes. It brought up things I didn't even remember. Same. And honestly, some of the things that we worked on did get processed.
Yep.
But if I had to pinpoint a couple things, it was really the talk therapy helped with the trauma. Now, to distinguish what I mean by this, it didn't resolve the trauma.
Right.
It helped me work through it. But then it was up to me. And I didn't realize this immediately until I get to this next part, which is really what I feel is the most important form of the treatment here. I didn't realize that there was more to these incidents, both professional and personally, that I had to process, and that just talking about it wasn't going to help. And I didn't realize what it was until I started meditating and using mindfulness. And one of the books I always throw out there, and I did it during my presentation along with about 3 other people, is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Amazing book. And I had already sort of in 2021 and 2020, I had already sort of started getting into this mindfulness thing because I realized the missing piece with all this, with healing, was I wasn't facing the emotions and the feelings that had either happened or were happening.
Yep.
And that's what I need to do. The talk therapy was great. The few sessions of EMDR that worked were awesome. There was other treatments in there that, chipped away, sure.
Yeah.
But in the end, when I started reading and learning about mindfulness, in meditation, I realized that now is all that matters. And when I'm in the now, I can come back from my moment and I can heal from all the power of the shit that had happened to me, whether it's the feelings and the emotions or the actual events or actions that were taking place. And so I started facing these things, and I started facing the raw power that was associated with each event. And there's a lot of events. And
Yeah.
I started working on them. I started healing. And for me, I always tell people this. I then became a, almost 43-year-old man who was finally discovering his emotions again, because I had
Yeah.
no idea. I had no idea. I didn't know that most of the time I was scared. I didn't know that most of the time I was afraid or sad, all
Yeah.
things that men never are supposed to feel. And even some
Right.
women, you know what I mean? We're not supposed to feel those things. And I was now feeling them and I didn't know what they were. And so now, instead of being like, oh, I'll have something happen, instead of being like, oh, I'm upset about this, I can almost always pinpoint what that emotion is. I'm sad.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and I'm man enough to admit this, I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm scared. There's a lot of unknowns, and
Yeah.
so meditation and mindfulness, I would say by far, hands down, is what for me has led me to the most amount of healing and growth, post-traumatic growth.
That's amazing. So I heard you and Steve Holmes that
Huh,
spoke. He's going to be on the podcast in the near future too.
nice. Yeah.
Big macho Marine,
Yeah.
right? And he's talking about meditating. I loved watching you two banter back and forth about, two grown men meditating and coloring books and all that stuff. But
Oh yeah. No.
to me, to see that transition for you, super proud of the work that you've done. And I do think it's important for folks to hear the different pieces, because for me, EMDR worked. I did find the book. What is the title again? Say it again. Breaking the Habit of Yourself. Is that
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself? So I did try. I don't know if you saw me sitting in the parking lot for a while as we were leaving. I was trying to find the audiobook of it, and I was only able to find the YouTube video of it, and it was challenging to have the YouTube video going while I was driving home and using my GPS and everything. So I haven't had a chance to start the process, but I'm going to get the audiobook, because for me, ADHD, I have to listen to things. But it's definitely something that I want to do, because in my brain, I don't think that I can meditate, but to hear you and Steve and I think Jules also mentioned it.
Yep.
So you had 3 different speakers who had this already in their presentation. So to me, it sounds like it's a big deal, and it allows, because I'm always about putting new tools in my toolbox, because today this tool works. Tomorrow, that might not be the tool for the job.
Right.
Right.
Right. And the nice thing with this book, and I want to stress this to anyone who hears this and wants to read it, it's not just okay, now we're going to meditate. This is how we meditate. This is why meditation works. This is how restructuring and refiling your brain can work. He goes over it, and he doesn't go over it in a PhD anatomy of the brain sort of way. He goes over it in a layman's terms sort of way. And for me, and for a lot of respondents, we like to know how things work, right?
Yeah.
If we can see an instruction manual, we never have to see the instruction manual again. But once we can see that instruction manual, how something operates, we can put it into operation. And that's what this book does. And for me, that helped me the most.
That's cool. So you mentioned your extremely supportive wife, Adele, who what I refer to, same with my husband, picked up the broken pieces that they had nothing to do with breaking.
Pretty much.
And you have a beautiful daughter.
Yep. 3.5-year-old Riley. Yep.
So how different is life today?
It's dramatically different. I look at for a large portion of my life, I always feared what the next challenge was going to be. On the job, I rose to the occasion.
Yep.
On the job, I think most of us, even if we're hurting and tearing ourselves apart on the other side, we're the first one in the door, we're the last one out, right? I was that guy. But in my personal life and growth, I was always afraid of that next challenge or what it might be. These days, because of how much healing I've done, how much support I have in my household, I look forward to the next challenge. And for me, with all that I do these days, I wake up every day and the first thing I say to myself is, today is going to be whatever I choose to let it be, how I react to it in that manner. And I'm going to do better today than I did yesterday. And at least with at least one thing. It doesn't have to be that, okay, you only had $50 in the bank yesterday, I'm going to make it so I have 3,000. Not in that sense. One thing. Okay, yesterday this affected me and I got angry about it. Today I'm not going to let that affect me and I'm not going to get angry about it. Something as simple as that. And I try to spearhead everything going forward and take everything as an opportunity. And because of that, I've been able to enjoy both my marriage, but specifically, my young daughter. I mean, having three kids, two of which are adults themselves now, having a 3.5-year-old at 44 is
Yeah.
it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
I
But
bet.
I'm going to tell you something. I was leery about having a kid when I was 40. My wife is younger than me by quite a bit. And I was leery, but I'm going to tell you something. I have been able to witness and experience things that I don't think I would have appreciated, trauma or not, back when I was 22 and 23 with my other kids.
Yeah.
The kids are an amazing gift and they allow us to see innocence that we sometimes forget we used to have. And it's been a roller coaster ride. There's been some stuff that has happened, but honestly, all of us led to growth. And Riley has given me the opportunity to see things that I don't ever remember experiencing with my other two kids, and it's been a gift. It's been amazing, and I love every day. And
Awesome.
so that's where I'm
Well,
at.
I love success stories.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know if I'd ever find somebody that wants to come on the podcast. If there's somebody out there that's like, yeah, I'm in the middle of this and I'm choosing not to get help. Like I one of the things that I get a little bit frustrated with is I'll have folks that'll reach out to me and, say they're struggling and I'll kind of point them in a right direction, or we'll have conversations and they see that I'm being successful in my recovery. But then they won't do the work.
right.
They just they won't do the work. Yeah, okay. Have you called a therapist? Because I gave you a list of the therapists in your area that do EMDR for trauma and PTSD. Have you called them yet? No, I haven't. If there was something that you could say to the person right now that's in the thick of it, that's in the mess, that's in the weeds, that has been listening, or they know that there's help out there, but they haven't executed, what would you say to them?
So for me, because even to this day, I'm a blunt, honest guy, and I appreciate the same in return. I would appreciate someone making me aware that nothing's going to change until I just choose to change it. And that could be something as simple as going a different route to work, or it could be as simple as facing the shit you've been through and acknowledging that you're human and that it's okay to be feeling everything that you are.
Yeah.
And that's really the message, is that it is okay to be feeling these things. There is anyone who's doing this job, anyone who in society, you're not a cyborg. We're humans. We're emotional creatures. You know what I mean? We have these feelings, but for so long, because of whatever it was, society, culture, whatever it is, we've been told that we don't, but we do. You do have these. That's why you get angry, because you're fighting feeling what you really are, which is either fear or sadness. So face these things,
Because
acknowledge the fact that you're
it's
human.
usually not anger. Anger is the
No,
secondary emotion to the real feelings that we're having.
bingo.
That's really cool. And now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about where you are in your position with first responder coaching, because a lot of folks aren't aware of what coaching is. They think therapy, right? That
Right.
therapy is the only opportunity. Like, I got to go talk to a therapist, and a lot of times therapists, they listen. They
Yeah.
don't give tools. They don't give you homework assignments. They don't give you things to tangibly walk out with. Tell me a little bit about your role. Well, first of all, tell me a little bit about first responder coaching, because I do have the podcast with Jen and we talk about it and a little, on her aspect of it, starting it and why she started it. But talk a little bit about what it is, so folks that are listening right now know what it is. But then I want you to talk about your role for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
So what I always tell people when it comes to therapy versus coaching is one doesn't replace the other.
Yep.
For one thing, therapists kind of, when you go to a therapist, you're depressed. Okay, we're going to work on depression. Oh, you have anxiety. We're going to. They have the answer that you need. So the difference that I found with coaching is, yeah, sure, it's a meeting set up, structured, I guess, similar to what a therapy meeting would be, but it's a little different. You're doing all the talking, you have the answers as the person being coached, and your coaching partner is there to help guide you and help you set goals and see different perspectives on things. And it's not just mental health, because it's not therapy and it's not crisis work. It's like more of a peer support model, I guess, if you had to put a label to what this meeting would be. And so when it comes to how I kind of got into it, I met Jen through Facebook group. We sort of connected, realized we had similar paths, similar goals with mental health and breaking down the stigma and helping first responders. And so I get coached, we start working on things, and I immediately start seeing that as much as, therapy was great, it was more of a, here, I'm the expert and this is what you need to do, follow my steps. And that's good with certain things. But with coaching, I was able to work on things that maybe had nothing to do with my mental health. Maybe it was just goals I never wanted to face because of my mental health.
Right.
And getting someone who held you accountable and responsible for doing these and kept up with you and checked on you helped me do so much more of the other things that I'm doing these days that are part of my success. And I just built on it. And then after a while, I just did it myself. But then, so after being coached, I became a coach. So I'm now a certified coach. And the whole plan was to bring me on as sort of her street credit, if you will.
Yeah, that it worked.
And so I originally became the director of business development. Very quickly realized I am not a salesman.
Yeah.
I am not someone who can, sell a refrigerator to someone who's looking for a stove. So
I totally can, by the way. That's my niche, is I could sell a ketchup popsicle to a man in a white suit. I don't want to sell it to you. I don't want to sell it to you. I just naturally do it. Like I don't want quotas and criteria and all that, but I'm pretty good at that.
That is, I wouldn't say it's a weakness, but acknowledging doing something that I'm not comfortable doing is a weakness. So I acknowledge it. We switched my position. I'm now the director of promotions, and essentially what I do is when I speak on behalf of FRC, because I do speak outside of FRC.
Yep.
When I speak on behalf of FRC, I really tie in how important coaching can be, and the way I tie it in is much of what I just said, but also how much it can be beneficial to so many other parts of our life once you learn what coaching is, how to utilize it both either as a coach or being coached. You learn so many different types of listening skills and conversational skills that it's directly transferable to therapy, to your mental health recovery, and to your relationships. And one of the things that I've been able to work on with my wife is this we're both Irish, and at times is oil and water, as I'm sure many couples will be like, oh yeah, try and have a conversation. And that's natural, right? Yep. One of the things we've been able to work on is clarity in our conversations, not necessarily always getting to a result, but the clarity. What do you mean? What are you trying to convey? What is the message?
Big, so huge, so huge.
Huge. And that goes back to not just mental health stuff, but like paying the bills. What's your plan today? What's your schedule next week? And these days I'm very busy. And if I hadn't worked on these listening and conversation skills with my wife, my wife would wake up some morning, I'd be heading out the door to go catch a plane somewhere. Like we weren't communicating, and this has allowed that. And it's such a very powerful tool that I swear by. I mean, it's helped me in so many parts of my life. And so I always try to talk to people about it. Even when I'm not representing FRC, coaching is part of my life now. And I mention coaching in almost every presentation I do.
Yep.
So it's
just a different, it's another tool. It's a different tool. Yep. And it allows us to understand. I do coaching. I have a personal coach who was the one, Gord McFarlane, who introduced me to the DISC human behavior model in the next level. So that's a huge part of my foundation. But his coaching for me helps me first understand myself and then other people. And where those kind of clashes might happen, and that communication and the expectations and things like that. And, I think it's really cool that Adele is that calm to your chaos, and she's able to, understand kind of who you are, where you're coming from. And, you guys are truly working together as to become a success story. And I think that's great. And maybe Adele needs to be on my podcast as the calm to the chaos.
I can talk to her. She hasn't done a podcast yet, but maybe you can be her first.
Yeah, well, maybe she needs to, because I do think one of the sessions that I'm going to be writing is about the family and kind of the impacts that what we go through, how it affects the family and what they're kind of responsible for, and yeah, maybe she needs to be the first of that on there. So
nice. Yeah, I'll talk to her. For sure.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a really powerful conversation. And with every conversation that I have, I know that it's going to affect someone and it's going to change somebody's life. And you and I both know we may never know who it changed, right?
You never know.
You never know.
Okay. And that's okay.
As long as it's changing and we know that. So, but until next time, my friend, stay safe.
You too, Tracy. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, heroes. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and follow me on my On Scene First social media so you too can keep up with my shenanigans. And make sure you get to know our friends over at NGA 911. You can start by heading over to their social media and thanking them for being our premier sponsor. Remember, stay safe, stay strong, and stay here. We need you.